are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast.
And welcome everybody to the ITMOD podcast. Yes, do not adjust your iPhones, your iPads. This is not the Disco Dork. This is the Turtle Dork. I have taken over this podcast. Actually, that's not true. Actually, our other dorks are en route. They were in Fantastic Fest, enjoying a glorious time, but they will be here later today. But I do have someone here with me today. He's been on the show before. That is William Dass, Billy Dass, the Indie Dork.
Yay! I'm here. I won't be nearly as gracious. Those guys screwed off. They went to Fantastic Fest. They think they're so cool. They don't have to show up for the opening day last weekend. We know where it's at.
Exactly. This right here is where the party is at.
You're right.
And we also have the mastermind behind Lost Weekend, Mr. Andy Garrison.
Welcome. They say once you're stepping, you're always stepping. And I'm stepping.
Step is life.
Step is life. I also learned college is a business. The other day. College is a business.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gentlemen, I'm very honored and proud to have the ITMOD podcast back to Lost Weekend again, holding it down. You two, you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Those other guys, they'll try to catch up.
Thank you.
They'll try, but they won't.
Thank you. I'll believe me. I will get my assessment from the Disco Dork later on once he hears these files. So let's get into it. Andy, you did mention that Step is life, and Step it was the opening film for Lost Weekend 8.
It was.
I thought this was an absolutely magnificent documentary, a powerful, uplifting story about these young women using Step as an outlet for themselves, and also just trying to make a better life for themselves in an impoverished Baltimore city. Let's go ahead and let's go around robin. Let's get everybody's thoughts. Andy, let's start with you. What were your initial thoughts?
Cried my eyes out. There's not a question about it. Tears flowed from my eyes on a heavy basis with this film. You know, the story is something that we're familiar with. It is we could watch a football movie, we could watch a basketball film. We have watched them many times over with this same sort of concept and feel. But what was, I think, powering and unique about this is that I felt probably the strongest connection to these ladies. Our director did a fantastic job of just not only combining the women of the Step team, but also their families and then the community that surrounds them. And you have to watch this film with all three of those things in mind. And I think that that's what makes Step incredibly powerful. Absolutely, the title alone says Step, so you know what you're sort of getting into. I was not prepared for everything else that sort of surrounded these ladies, and I think that was the most amazing thing. I'm also slightly angry, and this goes out to my my guidance counselor in high school. I mean, if we had someone like the guidance counselor in this at every single school, imagine the change this world would have. And to me, that was the most empowering movement. I mean, when we and I'll wrap up with two quick thoughts here. But we watched a film, Eagle Huntress, recently for Film Club, and that is a powerful story about a young girl trying to become an eagle huntress in a male-dominated sort of field. And that's a very powerful film, but what was even more impressive was the way that her father really supported and made her feel like she could do this. And to watch the family support and to see that guidance counselor do that same sort of thing, that to me was the true power of this film, is we really enunciated and stressed within the introduction that community is what makes this Lost Weekend work.
Exactly.
It's what makes films work, I think, as well. And it was me just sort of nailing that coffin a little bit more in hopes that people would see it truly does make a community to make change in what we're doing. We also, number 2, watched Whose Streets, the powerful Magnolia documentary about the Black Lives Matter movement earlier this month, and to see the transition from all of that. I mean, there was a line they said in this where it was like the local news is saying that we're cleaning up and we're making Baltimore better, and CNN is just pushing hard on the violence and the the sort of chaos that's happening in this area, and that's not what's happening at all. And that's exactly what Who Streets also stressed a little bit about. And I think we have a very strong misnomer or misunderstanding about what's happening within our inner city cultures, and it showed the true what we can do if we just put a little bit of I don't want to say love, but if we just sort of guide and nourish that sort of communities. And so, oh my God, it was emotional and it was powerful. And hopefully I've stolen all of your limelight when I said that.
Oh, no.
Billy's already like, I was going to say that. I was going to say
Did you
that.
read my notes, Andy?
In fact, I was looking directly over your shoulder, and I was just like, oh, that's a good idea. I better go ahead and say that from right there. So, but that was me. And a lot of times you may say, Andy just sort of weirdly programmed this, and that's the way it's going to go. I do sort of sometimes think about what I'm doing beforehand. It's not just that. Plus, and I'll do this real quick, and this will be the very last thing. I know I said 2, but I'm going to say 3. Shenandoah University's Hornets on Deck were amazing. They introed us by doing a step performance. I had never seen a step performance live before, and to see it live and to know that our community has something like that. If anything, I just want to make sure we give the biggest shout out to them because they came out. They're 1 year in existence, and this is what they're performing. Imagine if they're 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years in existence. Wow. And what that's going to look like. Oh my God, bravo to them. That's all right, amazing. Andy's done. I'll let you guys give your words now. Oh my God, I could just ramble on about
Well, before anybody else steals your thunder, Billy, let's go ahead and get some of your thoughts. What did you think of Step, our opening film from last night?
Well, as already discussed, everything that Andy said, because point by point by point. It's funny, though, that you mentioned the part where they were talking about the CNN story and how they were covering it, because I remember that in the aftermath of that, when civil unrest immediately started to break out for that, CNN showed that clip of somebody kicking in the cop car windshield just over and over and over and over. And exactly what the woman said in front of the memorial for Freddie Gray was, we were out there cleaning up, and you're just showing us acting like we're maniacs and thugs and looters, and that is not what our city is. And it struck me in that moment that, look, I am neither black nor a young woman, and so there's a lot of that I don't experience, and so my experience with that is people telling me that you need to look and you need to see this happen, and I feel disappointed in the country as a whole that the way that we've internalized the message that we need to look is that we look at a national news program that is sensationalizing violence being done for whatever reason, good or bad or rightly motivated or not rightly motivated, that they only focus on destruction, and we feel like that's checking the box sometimes for what it is that we're supposed to look at, and there's not destruction in the streets everywhere. There's beautiful things going on, and that was the thing that I loved about Step, was they gave us a chance to see people who, like, they won this lottery, which I have huge mixed complicated emotions about, the fact that they had to win a lottery to go to the Baltimore school for young women, was that, like, just the idea that 120 kids have to win a lottery to even have a chance to succeed in their community.
Just to get an education.
And then they go to the school and they put in their hard work and effort. And Blessin, one of the main characters that they focus on, who started this STEP program that we're seeing this story told through, she's smart. Man, they show her doing a presentation on the civil rights movement that was amazing. They show her putting her words together for a college application. They show how lively and sharp she is and creative she is with designing routines for the STEP program and how into that is. And then even with all of that intelligence and creativity and desire to want to be more than where she is, she has the hardest problems in front of her. Poverty in front of her, a mom with mental health issues, her own issues with patience and control and presence and trying to bear the emotional burden of all of that. I don't mean
being a teenager,
right? And just right, and then on top of that, you're just a kid trying to figure out what to do with emotions in general. There was a, I have 3 kids. I'm not a young man. I'm 35, but I'm 35. I have 3 kids. I have a full-time job. My wife has a full-time job, and it's hard. It is hard just to make ends meet. And I have a good job, and I get paid good money, and I live a good life. Yeah. I look at one of the characters who had she had 5 kids, 6 kids.
Yeah,
and
Corey's mother.
Yeah, and her first kid at 15 or 16, she's 33 years old. She's trying to make her ends meet. I don't know how she does it, but every scene they show her with her kids, she's smiling
Yeah.
And she's
and
happy.
kind of
and
what they would
present.
be okay shrugging off. I mean, sometimes we have food in the fridge, sometimes we don't even have a fridge. This is this isn't the first time we've had power go out. I mean, for me, it'd be like I go 3 minutes without having power. It's like the world is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And to see sort of that, and to see them still be able to be like, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
It's just empowering.
It's it really speaks to the mental fortitude that these women have, and this is something that we see repeatedly. I guess I can speak on this a little bit. We see this repeatedly in the Black community, and I've actually talking to Darren the Disco Dork about this. As far as like the oppression that African Americans have had and being in these poverty-ridden cities, there is a certain type of strength and fortitude that you have to have moving forward that a lot of people probably wouldn't understand. You would see a lot of the stuff that's really stacked against these women, and people would look at that and say, well, I just don't know how they could do this. I don't know how they can deal. I don't know how they can move forward. But there's something about something coming out of that that gives them the strength to move on. And you see that with Corey and her mother, with just her family going to church, and then her spiritual belief, and even knowing that that one conversation that he said she had when Corey got accepted, or I think before she got accepted, her mother said that we're going to make it work no matter what. Like, and Corey even said that too. Like, there were moments that she was homeless growing up, and she didn't even know it, because she always knew that no matter what, her mother was going to take care of everything.
Yeah.
And that's a lot for a single mother to have to put on her own shoulders.
It is.
And for her to be able to have that strength to go through poverty, to go through being homeless, and not let your kids see that, and always provide for your kids so that they know that no matter what, they're always going to be taken care of. That just shows the strength of these mothers and what they have. It was just absolutely fascinating just to see that side of the story.
It's movies like this that, so I watch it, and I think that the story that they're going through, for exactly all of the reasons that you just said, the grace under fire, the sheer presence required to just keep your focus and keep going forward in spite of all of those things.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to me, because it shows what people can do in the face of adversity. In the face of adversity to them personally, in the face of systemic adversity, in all of that, and having the fortitude to respond to that is amazing. And I don't know what to do with it. But the other half of this movie, the experience of watching it, is it makes me angry. Like, I watch a movie like this, and I am moved to tears through the course of the movie multiple times. Like you said, the line that you mentioned where, we've been out with. This is the first time we've been out of power, or the food's not in the fridge today, but once the food stamps come in, we'll have food in the fridge. And then the boy was like, I'm going to eat like a gorilla, and I was like, that's adorable, but also I need to go sit in a room by myself and cry for an hour, because this is a family that is trying to make it, and they're put on a track to make it, and people are helping them try and make it, and there's still no fucking food in the fridge.
I mean, you're right. It's infuriating. It's really infuriating. And to that point, I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying about the news media. Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about, I don't want to get too deep. I want to focus more on the film. But it's interesting in that one moment when you look at mainstream media like CNN or Fox News, and how they spin a certain narrative about a story or a situation. And the young lady said, they don't, the local news will show these kids trying to clean up Baltimore, but you turn to CNN and you see people in the streets looting, and it's creating a narrative. And we recently had, this past weekend, the whole national anthem fiasco with the Donald Trump speech, and it's the whole idea of people don't understand why they were kneeling for the national anthem. And then Donald Trump comes out with this speech, and he's basically, what he's doing is that he's hijacking the narrative of what Colin Kaepernick was trying to do last season by kneeling. It's not about disrespecting the flag. It's about bringing awareness to the social injustice that minorities and African Americans have been going through, the police brutality that they've been going through for decades, for centuries. And he's trying to bring bring awareness to that. And it's not mutually exclusive that kneeling to the flag is disrespecting the military. The flag means many different things to many different people, and it blows my mind that mainstream media is hijacking and changing the narrative of what these people are trying to fight for. And it's just to me, and it goes to what you were saying about this film as well. I mean, it's a systemic thing that these are smart women, these are smart young women, but they're behind the 8 ball. They have to work extra hard just to get ahead in life, just to get into college. I mean, these are women who they belong in these schools. Like what Corey said, when she got into, spoiler alert for anybody. Sorry, I should have mentioned that disclaimer at the top. But we're getting into spoilers. But with that being said, when Corey got into Johns Hopkins University, and she said, like, you know, I didn't think I would get in because they don't really accept. Oh man. They don't accept people like me.
Yeah.
You know, so this right there is showing you how much harder these women have to work.
Yeah.
You know, it's
that there. So I want to dovetail off of that because so that there's that line where she's saying, I didn't know I was people like that. And you can take that as a teenager just talking about, like, I didn't know that I could be successful or whatever.
Yeah.
But or you can look at that as a whole, like, as a young black woman who wants to succeed in her situation in Baltimore, she did not feel like she was a person that was allowed to go to a place like that. And so it's beautiful. The school gave her this thing, right?
Yeah.
But you got that kind of that dual approach to, like, who she thinks she is and who people are telling her she should be. And it's a struggle to resolve that. And I saw that a lot in Blessin, the young woman that we were talking about earlier, where she a couple of times in the movie, like, she didn't show up to class for a lot of her junior year because she was going through some trouble. They don't really get into that, but they said she was absent a lot. And the guidance counselor is talking to her about why she didn't come, and the way that she responded was just interesting to me because she said Blessin was hiding from Blessin's self. And there were a couple other times in the movie where she talked about herself as though she was starting to develop these kind of dual identities. One that was more in line with what the school is trying to bring her and show her to do, and the other one that's more in line with what her home life has been like, and I think a lot of, like, what people around her look at her and expect her to be. Exactly. And, you know, it's hard because when you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out your identity and who you are, and you keep trying on these things, like like clothes, right, is what they say. You try on identities and habits like clothes, and you find out which one works for you. Well, I still do that. I'm 35. I try it out. I switch things up. Right?
You have to. Yeah.
I see what I'm about by copying what other people do. I get that identity is complex,
Yes.
and I get that as a teenager going through and trying to figure all that out. But I mean, look at the reality of the situation that she's in, and her at 17 or 18 talking about herself as a split personality as a simple result of being in a poverty-stricken environment in a single-parent home in Baltimore. I don't know how to take that and respond to that, because I think that's the most human look that you get. Like you were talking about, like how the news kind of hijacks a story and how people can kind of push it for their own direction, and it gets away from sort of the humanity of what's going on. I mean, like you were talking about the flag, whether you are on the side of it is okay to kneel in front of the flag or it's not okay to kneel while the anthem's going on, right? That is a very human approach to saying, I see an issue and I'm going to do something human about it. And everybody is so quick to take away from the humanity of it. And you see people talking, like you see Blessin talking about herself like that, and immediately you're sucked into the fact that, Jesus Christ, she is a person just trying to struggle with who she is as a human.
Yeah, and that was another point that I picked up on too, was like that duality that she says, you know, I'm conflicted between two Blessings, you know, like that outward confident one, and then that one that struggles with her own identity, that struggles with, you know, just trying to make it and trying to find out who she is. And to be a teenager and having to deal with something like that. I mean, around this age, you do start to try to find yourself, but to find yourself in that way, I think for a young woman, you shouldn't have to really be faced with those type of complex issues at that moment. But unfortunately, because of their situation, they have to deal with that type of thing. So, I mean, this was a fantastic movie. I absolutely love this film. It's probably one of my favorites of the year so far.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what my list looks like by the end of December.
It's it's like I don't mean to go on about it. I just it's there's all of that. There's class issues. There's race issues going on here, and there's money issues going on here.
Yeah.
And like I don't know. I wrote a piece after I watched The Bad Batch, which was another Lost Weekend movie.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece for Film School Rejects where, we over the July holidays we're talking about at Film School Rejects we're talking about like what do people think about America and the American dream, and I wrote about The Bad Batch because to me it's an allegory of like what is the experience like in the United States right now, and the thesis for the piece, which designed to be provocative. But the piece is what if the American dream is a dystopia? What if where we are right now is the dystopic realization of what the founders set out to do years and years and years ago? And the premise for that is if you look around at the way that we set things up, and it's going to get a little bit of communism and Marxism here, and so I'm not a secret communist. It's going to sound like that. But we have a system that creates winners and losers, and we are not nice to the losers in our system. And that to me is the weirdness of the American dream, is that we talk about succeeding and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, but when people fail, we are mean to the people that fail. But they exist in a system that we have designed to have winners and losers. And I look at a situation in Baltimore where you have people there who they're going through something, and they don't have money and they don't have resources, and they don't have anybody on their side except for themselves and their community. And it's a hard thing to watch. So I don't want to get into the money of it too much, but it to me, I look at this, and for everything else that we said, you see a situation where the way that people think about education is supposed to be in the United States, the way that people think about how college should be run in the United States, you should not exist in the United States and have to win a lottery to go to a school that gives a damn about you. And when you do go to a school that gives a damn about you, you still cannot succeed because of your home life, because it is such a huge distraction. I was talking to my wife this morning in the hotel room about that, and she teaches high school in Fairfax City. And I think if she could take one point from this entire movie, it's that if you can look at this and you can see how profoundly the level of money that you have in your house affects the education that you are given, even it is the best education that you can get, even it is the best opportunity that you get, it still profoundly impacts your ability to take advantage of it. Because how the fuck are you supposed to pay attention in school if you are going home and it is a normal thing for the power to be turned off? It is a normal thing for there not to be food in the fridge. Yep. Does Blessing come across like the person who should have a 1.1 GPA for what it is that she does?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's not who she is.
No.
But that's where she is because of her situation. So I don't people are people, and they make choices that people make, and kids mess up, and there are consequences to the actions.
That's a part of life. But this is something different.
This is totally different.
This is something completely different. Problem. Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, very well put, Billy. Well put. So I guess we'll close out.
Right.
We'll close out step with those final thoughts. But I guess, we both can say that this is a movie that everyone definitely needs to check out, and this movie has a lot to say on many different fronts, on many different levels. So if it's in your area, it's a fantastic documentary. So please go check this out.
And the stepping is amazing. The stepping is amazing.
Absolutely.
So we talked about all that sad stuff,
I
but
know.
holy shit, their step team is so
and it's
good.
It's an uplifting movie.
Yeah,
when you see it at the end of
is.
this film, it's so uplifting.
Yes.
And that's what I take away from this film. So, it's a beautiful story. It's an
100%.
Oh man, I could literally talk about this all day.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No. Because believe me, if I don't stop myself, we'll continue. So let's get to the second film on the opening night, which is a film called Nocturama. I'm gonna go ahead and read the synopsis here on IMDb. Some young folks, tired of their society, they're living in plan a bomb attack over Paris before they take shelter for a night in a shopping center. So I'll start this one off. For me, this film I thought started off extremely strong. So you have about, I think it's 7 or 8 kids. They're about teenage age, and it starts off really strong with you kind of see them kind of going through and plotting out this basically terrorist attack on Paris. And it starts from the opening frame. You see these kids in the subway. They're going to like hotels, buildings, and you see they're all in different areas. And it almost feels like kind of like a heist film where they're going through like Ocean's 11, going through the whole plan and plotting everything out. And there's very, very little dialogue. I don't think a first word is spoken in this film. Maybe 10 minutes in, and then even then. Yeah, even then, is very little dialogue in this opening, in the first act of this film. And that was riveting to me. I thought that was an interesting direction for this movie to kind of go in, and it really hooked me. But then as the movie kind of went along, I felt that the second act and maybe towards the end of the first act kind of dragged a little bit, felt a little bit too repetitive. I thought once we actually finally got to see the bombs going off in Paris, and seeing it from different vantage points from all these different kids and how they were planning this throughout the city, I thought that was really effective. I thought the end of this film really ramped up, and it was really satisfying for me. We talked about this off air, and I guess we'll talk about it a little bit more about some of the character decisions and character motivations. Even though I thought the intensity for this film, and it was a nail-biting thriller, especially going into the third act, there were certain things that I think narratively I did have some issues with, as far as maybe, the backstory, motivation, and decisions about the characters and, the police force on the other side as well. But overall, I would say that I did enjoy this film. It lost me a little bit, but it definitely stuck the landing for me. But those are just kind of like my initial thoughts. We can get a little bit deeper into it. But Billy, let me know what you thought of Nocturama.
All right, so initial thoughts. Honestly, my initial thought is I think the running time of the movie was maybe like 15 minutes too long.
Okay.
I think because I did like the opening idea where they really spend the time showing them literally walking the walk and riding the subway rides as they go to execute on what it is that they've set out to do. Like, I think that's a very interesting narrative choice, and I liked it. I think that they just went too long with it. But that's my personal take. Yeah. I think the whole design of the movie, to be honest, is really well done, because I say it was too long, but every time there was a moment, like a moment of sharpness, of punctuation, of emotional punctuation to it, it is sudden, and I twitched in my seat.
Absolutely.
And I'm not a big, I don't really like the scare jumps or the moments of intensity. I don't usually really react to physically, and every single time, in the few instances where a gunshot goes off or something like that, they get you. So it is despite my I am not a filmmaker, and I didn't make this movie, and I haven't gone and done any of this stuff. So I'm just shitting on it for no reason, for how long it is. But they really did make a good movie, and they really do hook you, and it is interesting narrative choices. And so I think we've covered the initial thoughts. Let's talk about some of those character choices.
Let's get into it. Now, I guess for me, because we get introduced to these characters, and they're basically plotting this terrorist act on Paris. As the film started to go along, I thought that we would almost, get to, it was going to be layered. We'll kind of peel back the onion, and a lot more stuff will get revealed about who these characters are, what their motivations are. We don't really get that. Now, I was saying to you before, I'm okay with movies not explaining stuff to me.
Yep.
I actually kind of like that to a degree, because I think a lot of people really complain about that. I don't think everything needs to be spoon-fed to us.
I agree.
But with a movie for me personally, with a movie dealing with terrorism or enemies of the state, I think we should have a little bit more backstory about who these people are. I don't know if they were recruited by a terrorist organization. I don't know if this is something that they were born into, what their motivations were behind this, if they were just kids who got their hands on explosives and were doing this for fun. We just really don't get any of that. And even though we're following these characters, for me, there's a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah.
Even though you're with them throughout the whole film, and when you get to that third act, you are in a weird kind of conflicting way, rooting for them to kind of get out of the situation. But I feel myself being kind of separated from them in the way that I just don't understand why. I'm just throughout the film, I'm questioning, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? What is your motivation? Like, that was one thing that really just I question about the movie. But your thoughts about that?
I think for like you said, like you would expect in a movie that is designed to be around an act of terrorism that you would get more out of that. I do think that they peel back the onion on the character motivations, but it's not at all anything to do with why they decided to resort to violence to address whatever problems they had to instigate something.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah,
like it's so, but like they peel back the onion to say, who are these people? You know, like they show, so they're in this department store, and it's almost where they have, there's that playful scene in Dawn of the Dead where they're in the mall and they're like running around, messing around with stuff and trying out the toys and all the knickknacks and things that that they're not affluent enough to go ahead and grab for themselves. So it's like a kid in a candy store. In this case, it's like a kid in a high price mall where they're just like, look, I'm going to wear fine clothes, I'm going to do all this.
I know.
But in that exploration, you see their humanity come out of that, like who they are as people.
Yes.
And that, so I'm still working my head around, why would you decide to make the movie about an act of terrorism that they commit? And they're so somber-faced at the start of the movie. Like, they are, they're on a mission. They're going from point A to point B to point C. They've all got their waypoints. They've got their disposable phones. They got their game faces on. They're not fucking around. They're going to do something. And then they get to the mall, and they get, they get some toy AKs and some BB handguns.
I know, they get real lax.
Like, one guy's walking around in this, this bathrobe. The girls are playing with makeup with the boys. The boys are coming on to other boys. They're just, you start to see that shell come out of them where they come out of their game faces all of a sudden, and you realize, holy shit, okay, well, these are just a bunch of kids. And then I step back from the movie and I'm looking at that and it's like, wait a second. So this is a movie about people blowing up a bunch of shit in a city, and then we go and we see this humanity strip back. So it's an interesting choice to me, and I'm not totally sure why they went that route in particular.
That's interesting you said that. I never really looked at it as that juxtaposition from how they were behaving in the first act to how they were towards the end of the film. And you're right, they were very precise, they knew everything down to a T. They knew their marks, they knew where to go, where to throw the phones away, everything. The precision on their mission was spot on. Yeah, but then when they get to the mall, they get lax. You see one character go outside for a smoke, and he invites a homeless couple in. I mean, you see somebody else riding around the go-kart. And they're playing loud music and dancing around. And you're right, they do strip back, and you start to see the humanity of these individual people and who they are as people, not necessarily their motivation. But I never really thought about it in that sense, and I think that's interesting to see it in that way. But even speaking to that, I like it because as we get to the third act, you start to see the paranoia kick in.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
They're not as smart, or they didn't really have this thing thought out as much as they thought they did. So to kind of see that unravel, I thought was really kind of interesting, and that played into their characters as well.
But before we keep talking about stuff that we were talking about before we started recording, bad podcasting.
I know. Sorry, Brad.
So Andy comes over and we're talking about.
And they're filing the people in.
Yep. Now Andy's not talking; he's shouting "welcome," which is actually my favorite part of the morning.
Yes.
So Andy came over and was talking about he saw a relationship between Step and Nocturama.
Yeah.
And so I think what's interesting about Nocturama is, so it's a French film, right? And it is entirely in the French language. But if you pay attention to what generally has been going on in the love of France, and I'm not an expert, I just know kind of what I see as going on in the media. They are having their own struggles with unemployment in young people, not being able to find jobs. And one of the characters in the movie, he's going to apply for a security guard position, and because they show one or two flashbacks to sort of give you an idea of how the band got together. But he's going to apply for a job, and they say, okay, well, how long have you been looking? Well, at least a year. Like, that's a long time to look for a job. And so you start to, like, tease out some of that. But I think it's something where if you're watching Nocturama, it really benefits from sort of having an understanding of, like, what France is going through and their approach to it. So, like, because I feel like if you're not American and like, especially living in the DMV area and being very close physically to Baltimore and kind of being tuned in then to sort of what's going on in our general region, I feel like I watch a movie like Step, I'm familiar with sort of what is going on in general there. I'm familiar in, like, what's the trajectory, generally speaking, in the history of a lot of the young black women and people who came before them.
Yeah.
So, like, I get that, and I look at it, and so then I see a movie that is more than watching somebody go through a STEP program and find their way into college, which is a beautiful thing in and of itself. It's fine. So I think maybe Nocturama, like, you get a little bit more out of it. Like, I mentioned Dawn of the Dead earlier, right? So you watch Dawn of the Dead, and you see a huge amount of social criticism in what George Romero was doing for that.
Oh, yes.
It's because it's more than a zombie movie, right? Yeah. It's talking about American society and the pursuits that we have, and there's a lot of stuff. I don't want to talk about Dawn of the Dead because Nocturama and Dawn of the Dead are not the same thing at all. They're not. They're not. But they both wind up in a mall, and so they're both movies where they wind up in a mall. And I've decided that the symbolism for that is the same. But you see a lot of the kids talking about their struggles and all that, and then, like, the movie puts them in this mall, and instead of peeling back the layers of their motivation, they peel back their layers as people and the things that they're missing and the connections that they're trying to forge, and it's all in the midst of this this shrine to capitalism, which is this big shopping mall of shit that they cannot buy in any other way. Like, because there's the one dude who's like, man, the sound system is great, right? Like, everything that he says is, but the sound system though, right? Like, hey, I think the cops are gonna come and murder all of us. Yeah, but the sound system is dope, and you're like, it is. It is. Can't argue with that. So I don't know. It's an interesting movie. I definitely think it's worth a look.
Oh no, it's definitely worth your time. You should. I highly might be a bit much, but I do recommend you check this movie out. It caught me off guard, and I was pleasantly surprised by the end of this film.
Yeah.
And speaking to the sound system, if you watch this film, shout out to Willow Smith for whipping your hair back and forth. Anybody who's seen this, you will have that. I went back to my room singing that song like all night. I was like, "Damn you, Nocturama."
That's right. That's the one where they were like, well, you know, she was 10 when she recorded that, right? So, like, that I love that moment because they were like, you know, she was 10 when she recorded that, and I'm like, I didn't know that. That's amazing because this is a fucking banger.
I know.
And, like, she's 10 years old. That is crazy. But the dude, it's the same dude, and he goes, yeah, but the sound system though.
I know.
I don't know, that juxtaposition of, like, people doing really cool things and being supremely talented with, like, the adoration of this thing that does a thing. I guess that's maybe Nocturama in a nutshell. It's a good movie though. I mean, if you just take a look at it,
it's a good movie. I mean, withstanding some of its issues with the film. Again, no film is perfect, but you know, we're not going to talk about we're not going to talk about films. When you listen to this podcast, we're not going to talk about films in an extreme way. We're going to delve deep into these films, and there's definitely a lot of good stuff to take out of this. And so I highly recommend. Yes, I said highly. Go see this movie. It's worth your time. It's worth the discussion because there's stuff to talk about. And just before we kind of close out, I think also about this film too is very topical. Just like with Step. I think this film is topical because you look at what's going on now with whether it's ISIS and a lot of these bombings and terrorist attacks that have been going on in Europe. A lot of this has been going on overseas in Europe. Within the last year, we've had a couple of them. And for me, that was a little unsettling also to watch these bombings taking place in Paris because it just reminded me of these real life events that have been happening within the last year or so that have been happening in Europe. And so I think it's extremely topical to kind of really kind of delve in and look at the perspective of terrorism that's going on in some of these European countries and why it's being done or who's possibly doing it. So I don't know, I just thought that was just an interesting thing to look at as well.
I think so just on terrorism in general, I think it's look, we have this tendency to I don't want to say demonize or vilify because they're terrorists, they're killing people. Like that's not what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to treat them as boogeymen, as monsters that come out and that they're invincible or they lack some component or they're larger than life because they're missing that humanity component. And not so that we can sympathize with them or not so that I can go and give them a hug and make them feel better about what they're doing, but I think it's always important to remember that whether people are doing terrible things or whether they're doing amazing things or whether they're just existing, that like they are people at the core of it. Like there's one person in the movie who I'm pretty sure is a sociopathic murderer, and he feels totally comfortable with the choices that he made. And then you have people who are like, I'm about the mission, and I got to go off to war, and I don't want to go to war, but it's war, and that's their approach. And then you have people who are maybe just there because they were like, I like a girl or I like a boy or something like that. Like, I don't know that gives you anything in terms of fighting terrorism. I don't know if it gives you anything in terms of preventing it or working with it. But I always do think it's important to just remember that people do terrible things and people do great things.
It's interesting you say that, and I know we keep going on, but this is what I love about this because we just keep thinking of new points. But going to that point, thinking about the film more, you think about a lot of terrorist acts that happen, and a lot of these people, they aren't afraid to die for their cause.
Sure.
But then you look at these kids at the end of this film, and when they kind of get, when everything is starting to collapse on them, when the police find them in this mall, they fear for their life. They fear dying.
Absolutely.
So now it starts to make me think, the motive, it kind of does give you a little bit of insight, and you can kind of take what you want from that, as you watch the film, but it does give you a little bit more insight of maybe what their motivations were, because they don't seem like they are these people that are fighting or dying for a cause or for a belief. I mean, as fucked up as it may be, maybe they were doing it for kicks. Maybe they were doing it for fun. But we don't know. But them at the end of this film, and then also seeing themselves fearing death, fearing being caught. And again, spoiler alert, I think I've already said that. The last shot, the last frame of this movie with the last kid is being surrounded by these cops, and he's saying, "Help me."
God damn.
Help me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It gives you a different perspective. I just now thought about that. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe their motivations were different because they were so afraid of dying. They were so fearful. It's an interesting movie. I definitely think you should definitely check this out. Yeah, definitely check this one out. We mentioned it before. There's a lot to peel back here. So
Yes.
So yeah, that was our opening film, our opening night. Those two films, strong openings. I think it was really strong.
I think it's amongst
openings.
the best of last weekend. Absolutely.
So we're going to continue this. We're going to go ahead and take a break and get ready for day 2 of Lost Weekend 8. I'm going to see what we have on the docket for today. I know our first film. It should be an emotional watch for a lot. We just recently lost Harry Dean Stanton, and the first film of the day will be Lucky.
Yes.
This is one of the films I was looking forward to seeing. There was a lot of Oscar buzz around Harry Dean Stanton's performance in this film, and it's sad that we lost him. But to be able to see his final performance, I think is going to be a treat for everybody here in Winchester. We also had Rosalie Blum. Bad Idea Gone Wrong, This Is Not What I Expected, Patty Cakes, the film that ITMOD, In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast, we are sponsoring, My Friend Dahmer, Have a Nice Day, and The Bar. It's a lot of films today. I hope we can...
That's a long list.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of 5-hour energy, a lot of Red Bull, but we will get through it, and we're going to podcast all the way through it. So before we go, day 2, Billy, what films are you looking forward to today?
Lucky, Patty Cakes, My Friend Dahmer.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. All right. I'm looking forward to same patty cakes and Lucky are probably my two favorites I'm looking forward to today. All right. So we're going to get ready for day 2. So that ends our discussion on the 2 films for day 1. So Billy, let the folks know where they can find you on the social medias.
All right, I am on the social medias on Twitter at WBDAS. I have an Instagram account. Also at WBDAS. I don't know the password for it. And I learned that because Brian said, how do I tag you on Instagram? And I said, what is that? And he said, is this not you? And I said, I must be.
I was like, man, there's more than one WB Das?
There better not be, because I'll come for you. It's a Highlander situation.
I know. So I am the Turtle Dork. You can find me on Twitter at the Turtle Dork, on Instagram at the Turtle Dork 1, and on Facebook at Brian William Young. And so yeah, that's day 1. And so we're gonna start our festivities for day 2. And so with that, we are out.